In the vast tapestry of the galaxy, where civilizations rise and fall like waves against cosmic shores, there exists a truth so profound that it can shatter the foundations of everything we believe about ourselves. What happens when the most ordinary human possesses an ability that could rewrite the balance of power across 1,000 worlds? What happens when that same human discovers that the alien she trusted most has been hiding a secret that could either save humanity or destroy it forever? This is not a story about chosen ones or ancient prophecies. This is about Dr. Elena Vasquez, a xenopsychologist who never wanted anything more than to understand the minds of other species. But, when her latent telepathic abilities suddenly awaken during a routine diplomatic mission, she finds herself peering into the thoughts of Commander Zefak, a decorated Corvani warrior whose memories contain evidence of a conspiracy that spans centuries. The universe is about to learn why humans are called the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Not because of their weapons or their technology, but because of their capacity to see through lies, no matter how deeply buried, and their unwillingness to let injustice stand even when the cost is everything they hold dear. Dr. Elena Vasquez pressed her palm against the cool metal wall of the diplomatic vessel as another wave of nausea washed over her. The journey to the Corvani homeworld had been routine until 3 hours ago, when the headaches started. Now, standing in the corridor outside the main conference room, she wondered if she was coming down with some kind of space sickness. "Are you feeling all right, Dr. Vasquez?" The voice belonged to Ambassador Chen, a thin man whose perpetual worry lines had deepened considerably since they'd entered Corvani space. Elena straightened, forcing a professional smile. "Just a bit tired from the long journey. Nothing that won't pass." Chen nodded, but his expression remained concerned. "The Corvani delegation should be arriving within the hour. Your psychological profiles of their species will be crucial for these negotiations. The mineral rights agreement we're discussing could determine humanity's expansion into the outer rim for the next century." "I understand the importance," Elena replied, though another sharp pain lanced through her skull as she spoke. "My team has prepared extensive cultural briefings. The Corvani value honor above all else, and they respond well to direct communication rather than diplomatic subtlety." As Chen moved away to speak with his aide, Elena rubbed her temples. The pain wasn't just in her head anymore, it felt like something was pressing against the inside of her skull, trying to break free. She'd experienced migraines before, but this was different. This felt alive. The docking bay announcement echoed through the ship's corridors, announcing the arrival of the Corvani delegation. Elena gathered her materials and made her way to the conference room, determined not to let whatever was happening to her interfere with her duties. As the head xenopsychologist for the Terran Diplomatic Corps, she'd spent years studying alien mindsets and behavioral patterns. Today's mission was particularly important. The Corvani had been reluctant to deal with humans, viewing them as an unpredictable and potentially dangerous species. The conference room fell silent as the airlock hissed open. The Corvani delegation entered with the measured precision of a military unit. They were tall, humanoid beings with chitinous plates covering their arms and shoulders, and eyes that seemed to catalog everything in their environment. Their leader, Commander Zefak, was particularly imposing, nearly 7 feet tall with scars that spoke of countless battles. Elena had studied Zefak's service record extensively. He was a decorated war hero who had fought in the border conflicts against the Xian Empire, a respected strategist, and, surprisingly, an advocate for peaceful relations with younger species. His presence at these negotiations was seen as a positive sign by human diplomats. "Welcome aboard," Ambassador Chen said, rising from his seat. "We're honored by your presence." Zefak's response was formal but cordial. "The honor is mutual, Ambassador. The Corvani Council values the potential for cooperation between our species." As the formal pleasantries continued, Elena found herself studying Zefak more closely than usual. Something about his bearing seemed off, too rigid, even for a Corvani military officer. His eyes kept darting to the viewports, as if he expected something to appear outside. The meeting began with discussions of mining quotas and territorial boundaries. Elena took careful notes on the Corvani delegation's reactions and body language, but the strange pressure in her head was growing stronger. It felt as though someone was whispering just below the threshold of hearing. Then, as Zefak leaned forward to examine a holographic star chart, the pressure in Elena's skull suddenly spiked. The room seemed to shimmer around her, and she heard, no, felt words that weren't spoken aloud. The coordinates are wrong. They don't know about the real deposits. If they discover what's actually buried on Kepler 442b, everything changes. The Council will never forgive this deception, but it's the only way to protect, Elena gasped, her hand flying to her forehead. The thought had been so clear, so immediate, that for a moment she'd believed it was her own. But the voice, the mental tone, was distinctly alien. It carried the weight of military discipline and, something else, guilt. Dr. Vasquez? Ambassador Chen was looking at her with concern. Are you certain you're feeling well? Elena started, then, stopped as she realized that Zefak was staring directly at her. His compound eyes seemed to bore into hers, and she could see something she hadn't noticed before: fear. Perhaps we should take a brief recess, Zefak suggested, his voice carefully neutral. These negotiations are important enough to ensure all participants are at their best. Chen nodded gratefully. Excellent suggestion. 15 minutes? As the delegations filed out of the room, Elena remained seated, her mind reeling. What had just happened? Had she really heard Zefak's thoughts, or was she suffering from some kind of stress-induced hallucination? Zefak was the last to leave the room, and, as he passed her chair, he paused. Dr. Vasquez, he said quietly, might I have a word with you privately? Elena looked up at the towering alien, noting the way his mandibles clicked nervously, a Corvani stress indicator she'd read about but never observed firsthand. Of course, Commander. When they were alone, Zefak moved to the viewport and stood silently for a long moment. Elena could see his reflection in the transparent aluminum, and the expression on his face was one of deep conflict. In my species' folklore, Zefak said finally, there are stories of beings who can touch the thoughts of others. We call them soul touchers. Most Corvani consider such tales to be primitive superstition. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. That's interesting mythology. Indeed. Zefak turned to face her, and she could see that his fear had been replaced by something that looked almost like resignation. Tell me, Doctor, do humans have similar legends? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that Elena was only beginning to understand. Some human cultures have stories about telepathy, yes. But they're generally considered fiction. Of course they are. Zefak's mandibles clicked again. Just as the idea that a human might suddenly develop such abilities during a routine diplomatic mission would be considered impossible. Elena's heart began to race. Commander, I'm not sure what you're implying. I'm not implying anything, Dr. Vasquez. I'm stating a fact. Zefak moved closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. You heard my thoughts in there. The question now is what you intend to do with what you learned. The weight of his words hit Elena like a physical blow. She had heard his thoughts. The coordinates were wrong. There was something hidden on Kepler 442b that the human delegation didn't know about. And Zefak was involved in covering it up. I don't understand, she said weakly. Why would you? What's really on that planet? Zefak was quiet for a long moment, his compound eyes studying her face with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone making a decision that would change everything. Dr. Vasquez, what I'm about to tell you will put both our species at risk. But, if you truly can read minds, if this gift has awakened in you, then you deserve to know the truth. He paused, glancing toward the conference room door to ensure they were still alone. Kepler 442b isn't just rich in rare minerals. It's the site of something that your species will someday need, but that my people have spent the last 200 years trying to keep hidden. What kind of something? Proof, Zefak said simply. Proof that humanity isn't the first intelligent species to evolve telepathic abilities naturally. And proof that every other species that developed such gifts was systematically eliminated by the Galactic Council before they could threaten the established order. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. That's impossible. The Galactic Council promotes peaceful coexistence between species. The Galactic Council maintains stability, Zefak corrected. And telepathic species, Dr. Vasquez, are inherently unstable elements in a galaxy built on secrets and careful balances of power. The implications crashed over Elena like a tidal wave. If what Zefak was saying was true, if the Galactic Council had a history of eliminating telepathic species, then her newly awakened abilities weren't just personally dangerous. They were a potential death sentence for all of humanity. "Why are you telling me this?" she whispered. Zefak's expression softened slightly, and, for a moment, Elena caught a glimpse of something deeper in his thoughts, an emotion that felt strangely familiar, though she couldn't identify it immediately. "Because, Dr. Vasquez, I've spent my entire military career following orders without question. I've fought wars for the Council, enforced their peace, and believed in their vision of galactic stability. But, 2 years ago, I was part of an expedition to investigate ancient ruins on the edge of Council space. What we found there, what I saw with my own eyes, it changed everything I thought I knew about the galaxy." Elena leaned forward, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear. "What did you find?" "Evidence of the Kalari civilization. They were a species that existed roughly 800 years ago, highly advanced, peaceful, and, according to the historical records, destroyed in a massive civil war. But the ruins told a different story. The Kalari weren't destroyed by infighting. They were hunted down and eliminated by a coalition of species acting under Council authority. Their crime? They had developed natural telepathic abilities that allowed them to see through the deceptions that keep the galaxy's power structure intact." The conference room door chimed, indicating that the recess was ending. Other delegates would be returning soon. "Commander," Elena said urgently, "if this is true, why haven't you reported it? Why continue to serve the Council?" Zefak's compound eyes met hers, and this time Elena didn't need telepathy to read the pain there. "Because I have a daughter, Dr. Vasquez. And because I've seen what happens to species that threaten the Council's vision of order. But if you really can read thoughts, if this ability is emerging in humans naturally, then perhaps there's finally a chance to break the cycle." "What do you mean?" "I mean that humans have something no other telepathic species has had: numbers, distribution across the galaxy, and a reputation for being too stubborn to give up when they believe in something." Zefak glanced toward the door as voices approached. "The evidence is on Kepler 442b, buried in ruins that predate the Council's official surveys. If your species can reach it before the Council realizes what you've become." The door slid open, cutting off his words. Ambassador Chen entered with his aide, followed by the rest of the human delegation. The other Corvani representatives filed in behind them, their expressions professionally neutral. "Feeling better, Dr. Vasquez?" Chen asked as he took his seat. "Much better, thank you," Elena replied, though her hands were trembling as she organized her notes. As the negotiations resumed, Elena found it almost impossible to concentrate on the discussion of mining rights and trade agreements. Her mind kept returning to Zefak's revelation and the implications of her own newfound abilities. Every time she looked at the Corvani commander, she caught fragments of his thoughts: worry for his daughter's safety, regret over years of following orders he now questioned, and, underneath it all, a desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. The formal negotiations continued for another 2 hours, with both sides making careful progress toward an acceptable agreement. But Elena barely heard any of it. Her attention was focused on the undercurrents of thought and emotion that seemed to flow beneath the spoken words. She was beginning to realize that her telepathic awakening wasn't just changing her perception of this meeting, it was changing her understanding of everything. As the session concluded and both delegations prepared to retire for the evening, Zefak approached her once more. "Dr. Vasquez," he said formally, loud enough for others to hear, "I wonder if you might be interested in viewing some historical recordings from our archives? They contain cultural information that might be valuable for your psychological profiles." Elena understood immediately. "That sounds very helpful, Commander. When would be convenient? Tonight, perhaps? After the evening meal? My quarters have better viewing equipment than the common areas." Ambassador Chen looked up from his conversation with the other Corvani representatives. "Excellent idea. Dr. Vasquez's insights into Corvani culture have been invaluable to our mission." As the group separated for the evening, Elena felt the weight of secrets and possibilities pressing down on her like a physical force. In the span of a few hours, her entire understanding of her place in the galaxy had been turned upside down. She was apparently developing telepathic abilities that could mark her species for extinction, and the one alien who could provide answers was asking her to trust him with information that could change everything. Walking back to her quarters, Elena caught her reflection in a viewport and was startled by what she saw. Her eyes seemed different somehow, more intense, as if they were looking both outward at the stars and inward at thoughts and feelings she was only beginning to understand. She had 6 hours until her meeting with ZFAC. 6 hours to decide whether she was ready to learn the truth about humanity's place in a galaxy that might see her species' greatest gift as their most dangerous threat. As she entered her quarters, Elena realized that whatever happened next, her life as a simple xenopsychologist was over. The question now was whether she had the courage to embrace whatever she was becoming, and whether the truth ZFAC promised to share would be something humanity could survive learning. Elena spent the hours before her meeting with ZFAC trying to process what had happened to her. She attempted to research telepathy in the ship's databases, but found only theoretical papers and philosophical discussions about the possibility of mind-to-mind communication. Nothing that could explain the sudden awakening of abilities she'd never shown any sign of possessing. She also tried to test her newfound telepathy, focusing intently on crew members she passed in the corridors. But the thoughts remained stubbornly silent. Whatever had happened during the meeting with ZFAC seemed to have been a one-time event, leaving her to wonder if she'd imagined the entire experience. At precisely 2,100 hours ship time, Elena stood outside ZFAC's quarters. The door was larger than those assigned to human crew members, designed to accommodate Corvani height and build. When it slid open at her approach, she found herself looking into a space that was surprisingly sparse and militarily efficient. "Dr. Vasquez," ZFAC said formally, gesturing for her to enter. "Thank you for accepting my invitation." As the door sealed behind her, Elena noticed that ZFAC had activated a privacy screen, a standard diplomatic courtesy that would prevent their conversation from being monitored by ship security. The significance wasn't lost on her. "I'd prepared the historical recordings as promised," ZFAC continued, moving to a wall-mounted display that was already showing the opening frames of what appeared to be ancient Corvani text. "However, before we begin, I must ask you something directly." Elena tensed. "What do you need to know?" "Since this afternoon, have you experienced any further, unusual sensations? Thoughts that don't feel like your own? Sudden insights about people around you?" Elena hesitated, then shook her head. "Nothing. I've been trying to duplicate what happened, but it's like the ability just disappeared." ZFAC's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "That's actually encouraging. Uncontrolled telepathic awakening can be extremely dangerous, both for the individual and those around them. The fact that it's not manifesting constantly suggests you may be able to learn to control it. You speak as if you have experience with this." "I do." ZFAC moved to a secured storage compartment and withdrew a small, crystalline device that Elena didn't recognize. "What I'm about to show you isn't in any official Corvani archives. These recordings were hidden for good reason." He connected the device to the display system, and the ancient text was replaced by what appeared to be a three-dimensional recording of a massive stone chamber. The architecture was unlike anything Elena had seen before, organic curves combined with mathematical precision in a way that hurt to look at directly. This was recorded on Thelos Prime, approximately 6 months before the planet was declared uninhabitable due to atmospheric contamination, ZFAC explained. "The expedition I mentioned was officially an archaeological survey. In reality, we were investigating reports of technology that had survived from pre-Council civilizations." The recording panned across the chamber, revealing walls covered in intricate symbols that seemed to shift and change as the camera moved. But what caught Elena's attention were the humanoid figures carved into the stone, beings with elongated skulls and oversized eyes who appeared to be touching the foreheads of other species in what looked like a gesture of communication. "The Kalari," ZFAC said quietly. This chamber was their primary communication center. Every important decision in their civilization was made here, with telepathic consensus replacing the need for traditional government structures. Elena leaned closer to the display. "They look almost human. Evolved along similar lines. The resemblance isn't coincidental. According to the records we found, the Kalari believed that telepathic abilities emerge in species that reach a certain level of social complexity. They theorized that consciousness itself creates the conditions necessary for mind-to-mind communication. The recording continued, showing what appeared to be a vast library filled with crystalline data storage devices. But, as the camera moved deeper into the complex, the architecture began to show signs of damage, scorch marks, collapsed sections, and evidence of fierce fighting.
What happened to them? Elena asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer.
They were too successful, Zefak replied.
The Kalari could see through the deceptions and half-truths that most galactic politics depend on.
They exposed corruption in the Galactic Council, revealed secret agreements between species, and, worst of all, they began teaching their telepathic techniques to other races. The recording shifted to show what looked like a battlefield. Bodies of various species were scattered across a scorched landscape, but the Kalari casualties far outnumbered the others. Elena noticed that many of the fallen Kalari had their skulls crushed or burned, a deliberate targeting of the organs responsible for their telepathic abilities.
The Council declared them a threat to galactic stability, Zefak continued.
The official records say they were destroyed in a massive civil war, but the evidence we found tells a different story. This was systematic extermination, carried out by a coalition of Council species under the pretense of preventing a telepathic takeover of the galaxy.
Elena felt sick. How many species have been eliminated this way?
According to the Kalari records, at least 7 in the past 2,000 years. Each time, the pattern is the same: first contact, integration into galactic society, development of telepathic abilities, exposure of inconvenient truths, and, finally, elimination under the guise of self-defense or natural disaster. The display now showed close-up shots of Kalari artifacts, devices that seemed to amplify telepathic abilities, and records written in a script that changed and flowed like living thought. Elena found herself drawn to one particular artifact, a crystalline headband that pulsed with inner light.
That's a thought amplifier, Zefak explained, noticing her interest. The Kalari used them to extend their telepathic range across star systems.
With devices like this, a single telepathic individual could communicate with others on different planets.
Where are these artifacts now? Zefak's expression darkened. Destroyed, officially. But I managed to secure one small piece before the site was sterilized.
He reached into another compartment and withdrew a fragment of the crystalline material Elena had seen in the recording. Even dormant, it seemed to pulse with potential energy.
Commander, if the Council discovers that you have this, they'll execute me for treason against galactic stability, Zefak finished. I'm aware of the risks. But, Dr. Vasquez, you need to understand something crucial.
The telepathic awakening you experienced today wasn't random.
It was triggered by proximity to Kalari technology.
Elena stared at him.
What are you saying?
I'm saying that the mineral deposits on Kepler 442b aren't just valuable for their rarity. They're the same crystalline compounds that the Kalari used to enhance their telepathic abilities. When humans begin mining that planet, they'll be exposed to materials that could trigger telepathic development across your entire species.
The implications hit Elena like a physical blow. The Council doesn't know this? The Council suspects, but they don't have proof. My mission here wasn't just to negotiate mining rights, it was to ensure that humans never gain access to the full deposits.
The coordinates we're discussing will give your species access to enough minerals to make the trade profitable, but not enough to trigger widespread telepathic awakening. Elena began pacing the small quarters, her mind racing.
So you're protecting us by limiting our access?
But that means I'm betraying my orders and my oath to the Council, Zefak said quietly. Because I've seen what happens when the Council decides a species is too dangerous to exist. And I've begun to believe that maybe, just maybe, it's time for someone to stand up to them.
Why humans?
Why take this risk for us?
Zefak activated another recording, this one showing human settlements on various planets.
Elena recognized images from Earth's colonial expansion, families building homes on distant worlds, children playing in alien sunlight, communities of humans working alongside other species.
Because you're different, Zefak said.
Every other species that developed telepathy did so in isolation, as a unified civilization. But humans are already scattered across hundreds of worlds, integrated into the galactic community. If telepathy awakens in humanity, the Council can't simply eliminate you without destroying the foundation of interstellar trade and cooperation.
Elena watched the images of human families, understanding for the first time the weight of what ZFAC was suggesting.
You think we could be the first telepathic species to survive contact with the Council? I think you might be the species that finally forces the galaxy to confront what it's been hiding for 2 millennia, ZFAC replied.
But only if you're prepared for what's coming.
The recording changed again, this time showing detailed star charts and mineral surveys from Kepler 442b.
Elena could see that the planet was far richer in the telepathically active crystals than the limited surveys provided to the human delegation had indicated. The real deposits are here, ZFAC said, pointing to a region on the planet's southern continent.
Enough crystalline material to enhance telepathic development in millions of humans. But accessing it will require going beyond the agreed-upon mining zones.
And if we do that? The Council will declare humanity a threat to galactic stability. But if you don't? ZFAC paused, seeming to choose his words carefully.
Dr. Vasquez, your species is already developing telepathic abilities naturally. What happened to you today will happen to others, with or without exposure to Kalari crystals. The only question is whether humanity will be prepared for the consequences when it does. Elena sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the scope of what she was learning.
How do you know all this? How can you be certain about humanity's telepathic development?
ZFAC was quiet for a long moment, then moved to his personal terminal and activated what appeared to be a private communication channel.
Because you're not the first human to manifest these abilities. And you're not the only one I've been in contact with. The display flickered, then resolved into the image of a middle-aged human woman with prematurely gray hair and intense blue eyes.
Elena didn't recognize her, but something about her presence felt familiar in a way that made her newly awakened telepathic senses tingle.
Dr. Elena Vasquez, the woman said, her voice carrying across the light years with perfect clarity,
my name is Dr. Sarah Chen, and I've been waiting for you to find your way to us for a very long time.
Elena's hands gripped the arms of her chair. Us?
The Terran Telepathic Development Project, Dr. Chen continued. A classified research initiative that officially doesn't exist. We've been studying spontaneous telepathic awakening in humans for the past 5 years, and we've identified approximately 300 individuals across human space who show varying degrees of natural telepathic ability.
ZFAC stepped forward.
Dr. Chen contacted me 18 months ago through channels that officially don't exist. She knew about the Kalari, about the Council's history of eliminating telepathic species, and about the real mineral composition of Kepler 442b.
How is that possible? Elena asked.
Dr. Chen smiled grimly.
Because some secrets are too important to remain buried, Dr. Vasquez.
And because there are individuals in positions of authority throughout the galaxy who believe it's time for the truth to come to light.
Commander ZFAC isn't the only alien who's tired of following orders that perpetuate genocide.
Elena felt the world shifting around her once again.
You're talking about a conspiracy.
I'm talking about a resistance movement, Dr. Chen corrected. One that includes humans, Corvani, and representatives from 6 other species who have discovered evidence of the Council's systematic elimination of telepathic civilizations. We call ourselves the Collective, and we've been preparing for this moment when humanity would begin its telepathic awakening and force the galaxy to choose between truth and stability.
ZFAC moved to the viewport, his posture tense. Dr. Chen, we may have a problem. The Council has accelerated their timeline. I received new orders this morning. If the mining negotiations conclude successfully, I'm to recommend immediate comprehensive surveys of Kepler 442b.
Which means they suspect something, Dr. Chen said.
How much time do we have? Days, possibly weeks.
Once the Council discovers the true extent of the deposits, they'll move to quarantine the planet and begin developing a justification for limiting human expansion. Elena stood up, her scientific mind finally catching up with the emotional impact of everything she'd learned.
What exactly are you asking me to do?
Dr. Chen leaned forward, her expression intense.
We're asking you to help us steal a planet, Dr. Vasquez.
To use your position with the diplomatic mission to ensure that humanity gains access to the full crystalline deposits before the Council can intervene. And, we're asking you to help us prepare your species for a war that's been building for 2,000 years.
A war?
The war between those who believe the truth should be hidden to maintain stability, and those who believe that stability built on lies and genocide is no stability at all, Zefak said quietly. The war between the Council's vision of controlled civilization and the idea that every species has the right to develop its full potential without fear of extermination. Elena looked between the two of them, an alien military commander who was betraying everything he'd sworn to protect, and a human scientist who was part of a resistance movement she'd never heard of. Both of them were asking her to make a choice that could determine the future of human civilization. I need to know something, she said finally. If I agree to help you, if we succeed in exposing the Council's crimes and protecting humanity's access to telepathic enhancement, what kind of galaxy are we fighting to create? Dr. Chen smiled, and, for the first time, Elena caught a faint echo of the woman's thoughts, hope, determination, and a vision of something better than what currently existed.
A galaxy where species can evolve without fear, Dr. Chen said. Where truth isn't subordinated to political convenience.
Where the strong protect the weak instead of eliminating them. A galaxy where beings like you can develop extraordinary abilities and use them to build something better, instead of being hunted down and destroyed for the crime of being different. Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on her. When she opened them again, both Zefak and Dr. Chen were watching her with expressions of patient hope.
What do you need me to do? The next morning brought news that changed everything. Elena was reviewing her notes from the previous evening's revelations when an urgent message arrived from Earth Command.
Ambassador Chen summoned the entire human delegation to an emergency briefing, his face grave with implications that Elena was only beginning to understand. I've received disturbing intelligence from our contacts in the Galactic Council, Chen announced as the team gathered in the secure briefing room. There are reports of unusual energy signatures detected in the Outer Rim territories. Council deep space monitoring stations have identified what they're calling gravitational anomalies near 3 separate human colonies. Elena felt her blood chill.
What kind of anomalies?
The technical reports are classified above our clearance level, Chen replied.
But the implications are clear enough.
The Council is suggesting that human industrial activities may be causing dangerous destabilization of local spacetime. They're recommending immediate evacuation and quarantine procedures for affected systems. Dr. Martinez, the mission's senior geologist, looked confused.
That doesn't make sense. Our mining operations use standard extraction techniques approved by Council oversight committees.
There's no way they could cause gravitational disturbances. Elena exchanged a quick glance with Commander Zefak, who had remained silent during the briefing. She could see the tension in his posture, the way his mandibles clicked in what she now recognized as barely controlled stress.
Ambassador, Elena said carefully, do we know which colonies are affected? Chen consulted his data pad.
Kepler 186f, HD 40307G, and, most concerning, Proxima Centauri b. The Council is particularly worried about Proxima because of its proximity to Earth and the size of the human population there.
Elena's heart raced.
She recognized those names from Dr. Chen's research files. All 3 colonies had reported unusually high rates of individuals developing what they described as enhanced intuition and sensitivity to others' emotions. If the Council was targeting those specific worlds, it could only mean one thing. What's our response? Asked Dr. Kim, the mission's cultural attaché. Earth Command is ordering us to conclude these negotiations as quickly as possible and return immediately, Chen said.
The Council has requested human representatives for an emergency session to address these anomalies. We'll be departing for Council headquarters directly from here.
As the briefing concluded and the team dispersed to their various tasks, Elena lingered in the corridor outside the briefing room. She needed to speak with Zefak, but couldn't risk being seen having another private conversation with him so soon after their meeting the previous night. The opportunity came an hour later when she encountered him in the ship's observation deck, apparently studying star charts for the next phase of negotiations that would never happen. The colonies they mentioned, Elena said quietly, approaching the large viewport where Zefak stood.
Those are the ones showing early telepathic development, aren't they? Zefak didn't turn around, but his reflection in the transparent aluminum showed the weight of confirmation. The Council's deep space monitoring doesn't detect gravitational anomalies, Dr. Vasquez. It detects telepathic resonance patterns.
What they're calling spacetime disturbances are actually the psychic signatures of developing telepaths.
How long do those colonies have? Standard Council quarantine procedures allow for civilian evacuation within 72 standard hours, Zefak replied. After that, the affected systems are sealed and declared hazardous to galactic stability. Any ships attempting to enter or leave are destroyed as a precautionary measure. Elena gripped the viewport railing. We're talking about millions of people. We're talking about the potential elimination of humanity's first generation of natural telepaths, Zefak corrected.
If those individuals are removed from the general population and isolated, your species' telepathic development will be set back by centuries. By the time it manifests again naturally, the Council will have developed more sophisticated methods of early detection.
There has to be something we can do. Zefak turned to face her, and Elena was struck by the determination in his compound eyes.
There is. But it requires accelerating our timeline considerably, and it requires you to take a much greater risk than we originally planned.
What do you mean? Dr. Chen's resistance network has been preparing for this possibility.
We have assets in position to assist with evacuation efforts, but we need a way to get advanced warning to the colonies before the Council's quarantine ships arrive.
More importantly, we need to ensure that humanity's government understands what's really happening before they're forced to negotiate from a position of complete ignorance. Elena understood immediately.
You want me to contact Earth Command directly? To reveal the existence of human telepaths and warn them about the Council's true intentions? I want you to use your newly awakened abilities to do something that no other species has ever been able to do, Zefak said. I want you to expose the Council's genocide while they're in the middle of committing it. Before Elena could respond, her personal communicator chimed with an urgent message. The text was brief but alarming. All senior staff report to the bridge immediately. Priority 1 alert from Council headquarters.
As they made their way to the bridge, Elena's mind raced through the implications of what Zefak was asking.
Using her telepathic abilities to gather intelligence was one thing, but actively working against the Galactic Council was another entirely. It would mean betraying her oath as a Terran diplomatic corps officer, potentially putting her entire species at risk, and trusting aliens she'd known for less than 48 hours. The bridge was in a state of controlled chaos when they arrived. Ambassador Chen was in heated discussion with Captain Rodriguez while communication officers worked frantically at their stations. The main display showed the imposing structure of a Council enforcement vessel that had apparently just dropped out of hyperspace nearby. Demanding immediate compliance with emergency quarantine protocols, Captain Rodriguez was saying.
They're ordering us to change course for Council headquarters for what they're calling urgent consultation on human colonial activities. What about the Corvani delegation? Chen asked.
Already transferred to the Council vessel, Rodriguez replied grimly. Their transport departed 15 minutes ago.
Elena felt a spike of panic. If Zefak was already aboard a Council ship, their plans would have to change dramatically.
But, as she scanned the bridge, she noticed that the Corvani commander was still present, standing near the tactical station with an expression of barely concealed concern.
Commander Zefak, Chen said, noticing his presence. I thought your delegation had already departed. Technical difficulties with the transport, Zefak replied smoothly. My aide will represent Corvani interests at the preliminary Council session while I conclude our negotiations here.
The mineral rights agreement is too important to leave unfinished.
Elena realized that Zefak had deliberately missed his transport, choosing to remain aboard the human vessel despite the obvious risks.
The significance wasn't lost on her. He was committed to seeing their plan through, regardless of the personal consequences.
Ambassador, Elena said, stepping forward.
I request permission to access the ship's long-range communication array. I need to contact my research colleagues on Earth about some of the psychological profiles we've been developing. Chen looked distracted, focused on the larger crisis.
Make it quick, Doctor. We may be ordered to maintain communication silence once we reach Council space.
Elena nodded and headed for the communication center, with Zefak following at a discreet distance. Once they were out of sight of the bridge crew, he joined her at one of the private communication stations. "Dr. Chen is expecting your call," he said quietly. "She's managed to establish contact with resistance cells in all 3 of the targeted colonies. But time is running short, Council quarantine ships are already in transit." Elena activated the secure channel and waited for the connection to establish. When Dr. Chen's image appeared on the screen, the older woman looked exhausted but determined. "Elena, thank God. How much time do we have?" "Maybe hours," Elena replied. "The Council's moving faster than anyone expected." "What's the situation at the colonies?" "Bad and getting worse. Proxima Centauri B has over 40 individuals showing active telepathic development, and the local government doesn't understand what's happening. They think it's some kind of viral infection affecting neural development. HD 40307G is in complete panic, their telepaths are picking up emotional resonance from the approaching quarantine fleet, and the fear is spreading through the entire population." Zefak leaned into the camera's field of view. "What about evacuation efforts?" "We've managed to extract about 60 individuals from Kepler 186f, but that's a fraction of the total number. The Council's cover story about gravitational anomalies is working too well. Local authorities are preventing civilian ships from leaving the system for their own safety." Elena felt the weight of decision pressing down on her. "What do you need from me?" "I need you to contact Admiral Harrison directly," Dr. Chen said. "He's the only person in Earth Command with both the authority and the security clearance to authorize emergency evacuation protocols for multiple colonies simultaneously. But he'll never believe what we're telling him unless someone he trusts provides telepathic confirmation," Elena finished. "You want me to read his thoughts and prove that human telepathy is real?" "I want you to save 3 million people, Elena. And I want you to give humanity the evidence it needs to understand that we're facing an existential threat disguised as bureaucratic procedure." Zefak activated his own communication device, displaying tactical information about the Council enforcement vessels. "Dr. Vasquez, if you're going to make contact with Earth Command, it has to be now. Once we reach Council space, all human communications will be monitored and potentially blocked." Elena stared at the communication controls, knowing that what she did in the next few minutes would determine the course of her life and possibly the fate of her entire species. If she contacted Admiral Harrison and attempted to use telepathy to convince him of the threat, there would be no going back. She would be committed to Dr. Chen's resistance movement and everything it represented. "There's something else you need to know," Dr. Chen said softly. "Elena, your telepathic awakening wasn't random, and it wasn't triggered solely by proximity to Kalari crystals. Our research has identified specific genetic markers that predispose certain humans to telepathic development. You carry those markers, but, more importantly, so does Admiral Harrison." Elena felt the world shift around her again. "You're saying he's potentially telepathic too?" "I'm saying that when you make contact with him, you may not just be reading his thoughts, you may be awakening abilities he doesn't know he possesses. And if that happens, Elena, the Council won't be able to dismiss human telepathy as an isolated anomaly. They'll have to confront the reality that it's an emerging characteristic of our entire species." Zefak's mandibles clicked urgently. "Dr. Vasquez, the Council vessel is moving into intercept position. Once they establish a tractor lock on this ship, all external communications will be cut off." Elena took a deep breath and activated the direct Earth Command channel. "Connect me to Admiral Harrison. Priority Alpha clearance. Tell him it's Dr. Elena Vasquez with urgent intelligence regarding the Outer Rim anomalies." As the connection established, Elena felt a familiar pressure building in her skull, the same sensation she'd experienced when first reading Zefak's thoughts. But, this time, instead of fighting it, she embraced it, allowing the telepathic awareness to expand and grow stronger. The screen flickered, then, resolved into the image of a distinguished man in his 60s wearing the uniform of Earth Command's highest-ranking officer. Admiral Harrison looked tired and stressed, but his eyes sharpened when he saw Elena's face. "Dr. Vasquez? What the hell are you doing on an open channel?"
The entire diplomatic corps is supposed to be under communication restrictions until this council crisis is resolved.
Admiral, Elena said, letting her telepathic senses reach out across the light years separating them. I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you, because the lives of everyone in the Outer Rim colonies depend on your response. As her telepathic awareness made contact with Harrison's mind, Elena felt the shock of recognition ripple through both of them. The Admiral's thoughts suddenly became as clear as if he were speaking aloud, and she could sense the moment when his own latent telepathic abilities awakened in response to the contact.
This is impossible! Harrison's thoughts echoed in her mind. But I can hear you thinking.
I can feel what you're feeling, Admiral, Elena said aloud, maintaining the telepathic connection. The gravitational anomalies the Council is reporting don't exist. They're using false data to justify the quarantine and evacuation of human colonies that have developed telepathic individuals. In approximately 18 hours, Council enforcement fleets will arrive at Proxima Centauri b, HD 40307G, and Kepler 186f with orders to eliminate every human showing telepathic development.
Harrison's face went pale as Elena's telepathic communication confirmed the truth of her words.
Through their mental link, she shared everything she had learned: the history of the Kalari, the Council's systematic genocide of telepathic species, and the resistance movement that was humanity's only hope for survival. Dear God, Harrison whispered, his voice barely audible.
How long have you known about this? Less than 24 hours, Elena replied.
But, Admiral, through our telepathic link, you now have access to information that could save millions of lives.
The question is, are you willing to act on it?
Harrison was quiet for a long moment, his thoughts a whirlwind of strategic calculations and moral imperatives that Elena could feel through their connection. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of command authority backed by absolute certainty.
Dr. Vasquez, I'm authorizing immediate emergency evacuation protocols for all 3 colonies.
I'm also classifying our entire conversation under the Terran Species Survival Act, which gives me broad authority to protect human interests by any means necessary.
Thank you, Admiral.
Don't thank me yet, Harrison said grimly. What you've just told me means we're about to go to war with the most powerful military force in the galaxy, based on evidence that officially doesn't exist and abilities that are supposed to be impossible. I hope to hell you're right about this resistance movement, because humanity is going to need all the allies it can get.
The communication channel suddenly went dead as the Council enforcement vessel established electromagnetic control over the human ship.
Elena found herself looking at a blank screen, knowing that the next time she spoke with Earth Command, it would probably be as either a hero or a traitor, and possibly both.
Zefak placed a supportive hand on her shoulder. You've done something remarkable, Dr. Vasquez. You've given your species a fighting chance. Elena looked out the viewport at the imposing Council vessel that was now guiding their ship toward whatever fate awaited them.
I hope it's enough, she said quietly.
Because I have a feeling the real fight is just beginning.
The Council chambers on Nexus Prime were a monument to galactic unity, designed to inspire awe and reinforce the notion that the galaxy's diverse species could work together in harmony. Elena had studied images of this place in her diplomatic training, but experiencing it in person was entirely different. The vast amphitheater stretched for hundreds of meters in all directions, with seating areas customized for dozens of different species' physiological needs. But, today, the chambers felt more like a courtroom than a diplomatic venue. Elena sat in the human delegation's assigned section, acutely aware of the hostile stares directed at her species from representatives throughout the amphitheater. In the 3 days since her telepathic contact with Admiral Harrison, word had somehow spread through Council channels that humans were developing unusual capabilities that warranted immediate investigation. The chair recognizes the honorable delegate from the Corvani Defense Alliance, announced the session moderator, an ancient Thaldraki whose crystalline form refracted light in patterns that were supposed to represent impartial wisdom. Elena watched as Zefak rose to address the assembly, knowing that what he was about to say would either save or damn both their species. According to the resistance plan that Dr. Chen had transmitted during their brief communication window, Zefak was going to reveal everything: the genocide of telepathic species, the Council's deception regarding the Outer Rim anomalies, and humanity's emerging telepathic abilities. Honored delegates, Zefak began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. I appear before you today not as a representative of Corvani interests, but as a witness to crimes that have been hidden for 2 millennia.
Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Elena could sense the tension building, though she wasn't sure if it was due to her growing telepathic sensitivity or simply the obvious gravity of the situation.
For the past 18 months, ZFAC continued, I have been investigating archaeological sites containing evidence of pre-council civilizations. What I have discovered challenges the fundamental narrative upon which our galactic society is based.
The delegate from the hegemony worlds, a massive insectoid being whose species controlled significant military resources, interrupted with clicking sounds that the translation systems rendered as, Commander ZFAC, you are here to provide testimony regarding human colonial activities that may pose a threat to galactic stability. Please confine your remarks to the matter at hand.
ZFAC's compound eyes fixed on the hegemony delegate. With respect, honored delegate, the matter at hand is precisely what I am addressing. The activities in human space are not a threat to galactic stability, they are the emergence of capabilities that this council has systematically eliminated from 7 previous species. Elena felt a chill run through the chamber. Several delegates began speaking at once, their translation systems creating a cacophony of protests and demands for clarification. Order! The session moderator's crystalline form flashed red.
Commander ZFAC, you will provide evidence for any accusations you wish to make before this assembly.
I will do exactly that.
ZFAC activated a holographic display in the center of the chamber, showing the same Kalari ruins Elena had seen in his quarters.
But, this time, the presentation was different, more complete, with detailed analysis of the archaeological evidence and its implications.
This is Thelos Prime, approximately 6 months before its quarantine, ZFAC explained.
The official council records state that this world was contaminated by atmospheric toxins released during industrial accidents. In reality, Thelos Prime was the homeworld of the Kalari civilization, a species that developed natural telepathic abilities and used them to create a society based on transparent communication and consensus decision-making. The hologram shifted to show the battle damage Elena had seen before, but now with enhanced analysis showing weapon signatures and tactical patterns.
The Kalari were not destroyed by atmospheric contamination.
They were eliminated by a joint task force comprising vessels from 12 different council species, including my own. The operation was classified under the Galactic Stability Preservation Act, and all evidence was ordered destroyed upon completion.
Elena watched the faces or equivalent features of delegates throughout the chamber.
Some looked shocked, others appeared calculating, and a few seemed almost relieved that this moment had finally come.
The delegate from the Ethereal Collective, a species of energy beings that Elena had always considered among the most peaceful in the galaxy, spoke next. Commander, if such evidence exists, why has it not been brought to this council's attention previously?
Because, ZFAC replied, I am not the first to discover this information. Over the past 50 years, at least 17 council military officers have submitted reports regarding archaeological evidence of systematic elimination campaigns. Every one of those reports was classified and their authors reassigned to positions where they could pose no further threat to galactic stability. Elena felt her telepathic senses suddenly spike with activity. The emotional resonance in the chamber was becoming overwhelming, fear, anger, guilt, and determination swirling together in a psychic storm that made it difficult to focus on ZFAC's words. The human colonies currently under quarantine, ZFAC continued, are not experiencing gravitational anomalies. They are experiencing the emergence of telepathic abilities in their populations. The same abilities that led to the elimination of the Kalari, the Vorthak, the Naraland Confederacy, and, for other civilizations whose names have been erased from galactic history.
The chamber erupted. Delegates were shouting in dozens of languages while their translation systems struggled to keep up.
Some species were demanding immediate military action against humanity, while others called for ZFAC's arrest for treason. In the chaos, Elena felt her telepathic abilities expanding beyond anything she had experienced before. Suddenly, she could hear thoughts from across the chamber, fragments of communication between delegates, strategic calculations, and, most disturbing of all, confirmation that many of the assembled representatives had known about the genocide campaigns all along.
The Corvani fool has doomed himself, came a thought from the hegemony delegate.
But perhaps it's time to end this charade. The humans will be easier to eliminate than the Kalari were, 17 officer reports in 50 years, thought the ethereal collective representative.
How many more know the truth?
How long before this secret becomes impossible to contain? The resistance network is larger than we suspected. Came from a delegate Elena couldn't identify. If they've managed to coordinate this revelation across multiple species, we may be facing a more serious challenge than anticipated. Elena realized that her telepathic awakening was accelerating rapidly, triggered by the intense emotional energy in the chamber. But, more importantly, she was beginning to understand the true scope of what they were up against. The Council wasn't just a political body that had made some difficult decisions, it was an organization built on the systematic suppression of species that developed capabilities that threatened the established order.
Ambassador Chen rose from his seat in the human delegation area.
Honored delegates, I request permission to respond to the accusations that have been made regarding human activities. The session moderator's crystalline form was now pulsing with what Elena interpreted as stress patterns. The chair recognizes the human delegation.
Thank you, Chen said, moving to the center of the chamber.
3 days ago, Earth Command received intelligence regarding the true nature of the anomalies detected in our colonial territories. Based on this intelligence, we have initiated emergency protocols to protect our citizens from what we now understand to be an extermination campaign disguised as a quarantine procedure.
Elena felt the psychic atmosphere in the chamber shift dramatically.
Fear and anger were being replaced by something else, the cold calculation of species preparing for war. Furthermore, Chen continued, we have evidence that this council has engaged in similar campaigns against other species throughout its history. We therefore formally request an immediate investigation into the circumstances surrounding the destruction of the Kalari civilization and the other species mentioned in Commander Zifak's testimony. The delegate from the Synthetic Collective, a machine intelligence that rarely spoke during council sessions, activated its communication systems.
Query: what evidence does the human delegation possess regarding historical council operations? Elena knew this was the moment they had prepared for.
Standing slowly, she made her way to the center of the chamber, feeling the weight of hundreds of alien gazes upon her. Honored delegates, she said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to do.
My name is Dr. Elena Vasquez, and I am a xenopsychologist specializing in interspecies communication.
3 days ago, I experienced the spontaneous awakening of telepathic abilities that allow me to directly perceive the thoughts and emotions of other beings. The chamber fell completely silent.
Elena could feel the shock rippling through the assembled delegates like a physical wave. Using these abilities, I can confirm that Commander Zifak's testimony is accurate.
But, more than that, I can confirm that many of you in this chamber possess knowledge of the systematic elimination campaigns he has described. Some of you participated in these campaigns.
Some of you have spent years covering up evidence of them.
And some of you are currently planning how to eliminate humanity before our telepathic development can threaten your control over galactic affairs. Elena focused her expanding telepathic awareness on the hegemony delegate, the being whose hostile thoughts she had detected earlier. For example, the hegemony representative is currently calculating how many ships it would take to sterilize human colonial territories, and whether the economic disruption would be worth the security benefits of preventing a telepathic species from reaching technological maturity. The hegemony delegate rose from his position, his insectoid features clicking with rage.
This is preposterous. The human is clearly suffering from some form of mental instability.
Then, you won't mind if I share some of your recent private communications with this assembly, Elena replied calmly. Communications in which you explicitly discuss the need to resolve the human problem before it becomes as troublesome as what you refer to as the Kalari situation. Elena had no idea if such communications actually existed, but the hegemony delegate's sudden silence and the guilty flicker of his compound eyes told her everything she needed to know. The human possesses dangerous abilities that threaten the stability of this council, declared the delegate from the Central Worlds, a humanoid species that had always positioned itself as moderate and reasonable.
Immediate containment measures are clearly necessary. Containment?
Elena turned to face the Central World's representative, extending her telepathic senses toward his mind. You mean elimination, just like the containment measures applied to the Kalari? Just like the containment measures your species personally oversaw during the destruction of the Vorthak homeworld?
The Central World's delegate went pale. Elena could sense his thoughts racing as he realized that secrets he had kept for decades were suddenly vulnerable to telepathic detection. This assembly will not be intimidated by unsubstantiated accusations from a mentally unstable individual, announced the session moderator, but Elena could sense the panic beneath the official pronouncement. Then, let's substantiate them, Elena said, her telepathic abilities now operating at a level that allowed her to scan multiple minds simultaneously. Let's discuss the classified files in the Central Archives that detail the elimination of 7 telepathic species over the past 2 millennia. Let's talk about the standard protocols for identifying telepathic development and the rapid response military assets maintained specifically for dealing with telepathic emergence scenarios. Let's examine the secret communications network that allows Council leadership to coordinate elimination campaigns without leaving official records. Elena could feel her telepathic awareness expanding beyond the Council chamber, reaching out to touch minds throughout the Nexus Prime complex. And what she found there confirmed her worst fears. This wasn't just a political conspiracy, it was an entire civilization built on the systematic suppression of species that developed abilities the Council couldn't control. Most importantly, Elena continued, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber, let's discuss what happens now that you can no longer hide behind lies and half-truths. Because regardless of what you decide to do about humanity, the truth is now out there. Other species will learn about the genocide campaigns. Other species will ask questions about their own telepathic development and whether they've been subjected to similar suppression. And some of those species are going to decide that a galactic order built on genocide is not an order they want to be part of. Elena paused, looking around the chamber at faces that displayed every emotion from rage to terror to resignation. The choice you face now is whether you want to attempt to solve this problem the same way you solved the Kalari problem, through violence and cover-up, or whether you're finally ready to build a galaxy based on truth instead of carefully maintained lies. The session moderator's crystalline form was now flashing multiple colors and patterns that Elena's diplomatic training told her indicated extreme stress. This session is temporarily suspended while the Council considers. No, Elena said firmly, her telepathic abilities now strong enough to project her thoughts directly into the minds of everyone in the chamber. This session continues until we reach a resolution. Because while you've been debating, 3 human colonies have been under attack by your quarantine fleets. Because while you've been calculating political advantages, people have been dying. And because if you try to suspend this session, I'm going to use these telepathic abilities you're so afraid of to broadcast everything I've learned to every news network, every resistance cell, and every telepathic individual in the galaxy. Elena felt a surge of determination and support flowing toward her from an unexpected source. Other telepaths throughout the galaxy who had been awakened by the psychic resonance of the events in the Council chamber. Humans, yes, but also individuals from other species who had developed telepathic abilities and kept them hidden for fear of Council retaliation. For the first time in 2 millennia, the species that had built their civilization on the elimination of telepathic development found themselves facing the collective mental voice of those they had tried to suppress. The revolution had begun, and Elena Vasquez was its unwitting catalyst. 6 months after what historians would later call the Nexus Revelation, Elena stood on the observation deck of the newly commissioned Starship Harmony, watching as the first mixed-species telepathic colony was established on Kepler 442b. The planet's crystalline deposits glowed with an inner light that seemed to respond to the thoughts and emotions of the settlers working to build humanity's first intentionally telepathic community. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The immediate aftermath of Elena's revelation had been chaos. Some Council species had initially attempted to maintain the old order through military force, while others had immediately begun investigating their own histories of telepathic suppression. But the most significant change had been the emergence of telepathic individuals from dozens of species who had kept their abilities hidden for fear of persecution. The morning reports, said Dr. Sarah Chen, approaching Elena with a datapad containing updates from across human space. Dr. Chen had officially emerged from the shadows of her resistance movement and now served as director of the Terran Telepathic Development Institute, a position that didn't exist 6 months ago but had quickly become one of the most important in human government. Elena accepted the datapad, scanning the summary information with both her eyes and her now well-developed telepathic senses. The reports painted a picture of a civilization in transition, challenging, hopeful, and occasionally dangerous. Proxima Centauri b is reporting successful integration of 37 new telepathic individuals this month, Elena noted. That's a significant improvement from the early days. The training protocols you developed have made a tremendous difference, Dr. Chen replied. Learning to control telepathic abilities without suppressing them has turned out to be crucial for preventing the kind of mental instability that the Council used to justify their elimination campaigns. Elena nodded, though her attention was drawn to a different section of the report. What's this about disturbances in the Corvani territories? Dr. Chen's expression grew serious. Political instability. About 40% of the Corvani military has refused to accept the new galactic order. They're claiming that telepathic species pose an existential threat to traditional military security, and they're demanding a return to the old containment policies. And Commander Zefak? Leading the opposition to the military hardliners, Dr. Chen said with a slight smile. It turns out that having a war hero publicly expose the genocide campaigns has made him something of a folk hero among younger Corvani. He's been appointed as special ambassador to the newly formed Telepathic Species Alliance. Elena felt a surge of gratitude toward the alien officer who had risked everything to reveal the truth. Zefak had paid a heavy price for his decision, his military rank had been stripped, his family had faced death threats from Corvani traditionalists, and he'd been forced to accept permanent exile from his homeworld. But he'd also become the symbol of a new kind of galactic cooperation, one based on transparency rather than carefully maintained deceptions. Speaking of the alliance, Dr. Chen continued, we've received confirmation that the Vorthan Republic wants to join. Their archaeological teams have found evidence that their species had telepathic development 300 years ago, before what their histories describe as a great plague that eliminated individuals with enhanced mental abilities. Elena felt the familiar mix of sadness and anger that accompanied each new revelation about the Council's systematic suppression campaigns. How many species do we think were affected? Our current estimate is somewhere between 15 and 23, Dr. Chen replied. But the number could be higher. The Council's record-keeping was deliberately fragmented to prevent exactly the kind of comprehensive investigation we're conducting now. A chime from Elena's personal communicator interrupted their conversation. The message was from Admiral Harrison, now serving as Earth's representative to the Telepathic Species Alliance and one of the most powerful telepaths in human space. Elena, Harrison's recorded voice said, we've received a priority communication from the exploration fleet in the Andromeda approach vectors. Captain Morrison reports that they've made contact with a previously unknown civilization that appears to have developed some form of natural telepathic ability. The initial communications suggest they've been aware of the Galactic Council's activities and have been deliberately avoiding contact to prevent persecution. I need you and your team to prepare for immediate departure. This could be the most important first contact in human history. Elena felt excitement building in her chest. The discovery of telepathic species beyond the Milky Way would fundamentally change humanity's understanding of consciousness and evolution. It would also provide potential allies in the ongoing struggle to reshape galactic civilization. Dr. Chen, Elena said, I think we're about to learn that the galaxy is much more interesting than even we realized. Before Dr. Chen could respond, both women felt a familiar telepathic presence touching their minds. Elena turned to see Zefak approaching across the observation deck, his distinctive form easily recognizable even at a distance. Commander, Elena said warmly as he joined them. How are the negotiations proceeding? Better than expected, Zefak replied, though Elena could sense underlying concern in his thoughts. The alliance now includes representatives from 11 species, and we've established preliminary agreements for sharing telepathic development techniques and coordinating defense against any remaining Council hardliners. But? Elena prompted, picking up on his unspoken reservations. Zefak's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. But we're essentially building a new form of galactic government from scratch, with no precedent for how telepathic species should interact with each other or with non-telepathic civilizations. The potential for conflict is significant. Elena understood his concern. In the months since her revelation, several incidents had occurred where telepathic individuals had used their abilities inappropriately, reading minds without consent, manipulating others through mental influence, or allowing the constant input of thoughts and emotions to drive them to instability. The establishment of ethical guidelines for telepathic behavior had become one of the Alliance's most pressing priorities. There's something else, ZFAC continued.
My intelligence sources within the former Council structure report that approximately 37 species are considering forming a coalition of independent worlds, essentially a counter-alliance dedicated to containing telepathic development and maintaining the traditional galactic order.
Dr. Chen frowned.
That could lead to a galactic war unlike anything in recorded history. Or it could lead to the kind of honest negotiation that should have happened centuries ago, Elena replied. For the first time in galactic history, we have the ability to verify truth through direct mental contact. Lies and deceptions that have fueled conflicts for millennia can be exposed immediately.
Elena moved to the viewport, looking out at the growing settlement on Kepler 442b.
The colonists below represented a dozen different species, all working together to build something that had never existed before, a telepathic community based on shared consciousness rather than imposed authority. I keep thinking about what the Kalari might have accomplished if they'd been allowed to develop naturally, Elena said.
Their records suggested that telepathic communication could eliminate most forms of interspecies misunderstanding.
Imagine a galaxy where every diplomatic negotiation involved direct mind-to-mind contact, where deception was impossible, where every being could literally feel the emotions and intentions of others. It could also be a galaxy where privacy doesn't exist and individual identity becomes meaningless, ZFAC pointed out. The Corvani have legends about the dangers of collective consciousness, stories about entire civilizations losing their individual wills to telepathic hive minds. Which is why we need to develop these abilities carefully, Dr. Chen said. The training protocols Elena designed emphasize maintaining individual mental barriers while allowing controlled telepathic communication.
It's about expanding consciousness, not replacing it.
Elena felt her communicator chime again with an urgent message. This time it was from Captain Morrison herself, transmitting from the edge of the galaxy. Dr. Vasquez, Admiral Harrison, Command Staff, Morrison's tired voice said through the transmission.
You need to see this immediately.
The civilization we've made contact with, they call themselves the Eternal Collective, they've been monitoring our galaxy for over 3,000 years. They know everything about the Council's genocide campaigns, about the suppression of telepathic species, about the resistance movements. And they've been waiting for a species like humanity to emerge, a species that could challenge the established order and survive the attempt.
Elena exchanged glances with Dr. Chen and ZFAC. Waiting for us? For what purpose?
Morrison's image appeared on the communication screen, and Elena could see the wonder and concern in her expression.
Because, Dr. Vasquez, according to the Eternal Collective, what we're experiencing isn't just the random emergence of telepathy in one galaxy.
It's part of a natural evolutionary progression that occurs when consciousness reaches a certain level of complexity. They've observed it happening in hundreds of galaxies across the universe.
And? Elena prompted.
And they say that every galaxy faces the same choice we're facing now: evolve toward greater consciousness and telepathic unity, or stagnate in conflicts based on fear and control.
According to them, most galaxies choose stagnation.
They never overcome the fear of telepathic development, and their civilizations eventually collapse under the weight of their own deceptions.
Elena felt a chill despite the excitement of the revelation. What about the galaxies that choose evolution? Morrison smiled.
They join what the Eternal Collective calls the Community of Consciousness, a network of galactic civilizations that have transcended the need for traditional government and military force through shared telepathic awareness. A community where every being is connected to every other being across vast distances, where knowledge and experience are shared freely, where war and deception become impossible because everyone can feel everyone else's thoughts and emotions.
The implications were staggering.
Elena realized that what had started as her accidental telepathic awakening during a routine diplomatic mission had become part of something much larger: humanity's test for inclusion in a universe-spanning community of conscious beings. There's one more thing, Morrison continued. The Eternal Collective has offered to share their telepathic enhancement technologies with us, but only if our entire galaxy can demonstrate.